time from the deep sea. Off the coast of Antarctica, deep underwater, researchers have discovered the British ship called Endurance, the vessel that launched one of the most remarkable stories of survival and determination.
Over the last century, Sir Ernest Shackleton's leadership during the ill-fated Endurance expedition has been celebrated as the gold standard of heroic command. He famously led his crew to safety after their ship was destroyed by ice and sank to the bottom of the sea, but for years, the full picture of Shackleton's story was shrouded in mystery. There were questions about his strange and progressive health decline, the curious circumstances of his sudden death at age 47, and the final resting places of the ships that defined his career. After decades of speculation, the Shackleton mystery has finally been solved. Let's finally uncover all the secrets. In August 1914, just as the First World War was beginning, Sir Ernest Shackleton set sail from Plymouth, England, on the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition. His goal was ambitious: to achieve the first land crossing of the Antarctic continent. The journey, spanning nearly 1,800 miles, would take them from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea. The expedition was split into two teams: Shackleton's Weddell Sea Party and Aeneas Mackintosh's Ross Sea Party, which would lay supply depots from the opposite end. Shackleton and his 27 crew members aboard the Endurance first traveled to Buenos Aires, then to the remote whaling outpost of South Georgia Island. On December 5, 1914, they departed South Georgia and headed for Vauxhall Bay in the Weddell Sea. Their harrowing ordeal was about to begin. By mid-January 1915, the Endurance was within 80 miles of its destination. However, the Weddell Sea's heavy pack ice proved impenetrable. On January 18, 1915, the ship became trapped in the dense ice floes. For the next 10 months, the Endurance was locked in a slow, drifting prison of ice. As the Antarctic winter descended, temperatures dropped to minus 20 degrees Celsius and below, and the crew settled in to wait for the spring thaw. Shackleton ordered the ship to be converted into a winter station. The crew maintained a routine of daily dog exercises and scientific work to keep morale high. But the ice's pressure was relentless. On October 27, 1915, the Endurance's hull began to buckle. Shackleton ordered the crew to abandon the ship and set up camp on the ice. The crew managed to salvage lifeboats, tents, sledges, food, and navigational instruments. On November 21, 1915, the Endurance finally sank beneath the ice. Stranded on a moving ice floe hundreds of miles from land, Shackleton and his men began a desperate struggle for survival. For the next several months, they drifted north with the ice. They established two makeshift camps, known as Ocean Camp and Patience Camp, and endured months of brutal cold, hunger, frostbite, and psychological strain. By April 1916, the ice became too unstable, so the 28 men boarded 3 open lifeboats: the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. They launched toward Elephant Island, which was over 100 miles away. After 5 days at sea in freezing winds and rough currents, they reached Elephant Island on April 15, 1916. It was the first time in over 16 months the crew had been on solid ground. But Elephant Island was uninhabited, remote, and far from any shipping lane. Realizing no rescue would come, Shackleton made a bold decision. On April 24, 1916, he and 5 crew members set out in the strongest lifeboat, the James Caird, on an 800-mile journey to South Georgia Island, navigating by sextant and battling 60-foot waves and sub-zero temperatures. They reached South Georgia on May 10, 1916, after 16 harrowing days. But they landed on the uninhabited southern side of the island. Shackleton, along with Frank Worsley and Tom Crean, had to trek for 36 hours across uncharted, mountainous terrain to reach the whaling station at Stromness. Finally, on May 20, 1916, they arrived, exhausted, frozen, but alive. Shackleton immediately began organizing a rescue mission for the men still on Elephant Island. After 3 failed attempts due to ice and weather, he succeeded on August 30th, 1916, aboard the Chilean vessel Yelcho, commanded by Captain Luis Pardo. All 22 remaining men were rescued without loss of life. The entire ordeal lasted nearly 2 years, an eternity. For those who lived it, from the moment the Endurance became trapped in January 1915 to the final rescue in August 1916. Shackleton had led his men through one of the most grueling survival stories in polar history. His leadership, determination, and refusal to give up became legendary. The Endurance, meanwhile, disappeared beneath the Weddell Sea and became one of the most sought-after shipwrecks of the 20th century. The expedition failed in its original goal, but achieved something far greater. It became a timeless narrative of survival, leadership, and human endurance in the face of relentless adversity. But many mysteries lingered for over a century. Today, it appears we finally have a full picture. Sir Ernest Shackleton, hailed as one of the greatest polar explorers of the early 20th century, displayed remarkable physical resilience during his Antarctic journeys. However, beneath his ironclad image lay a troubling and progressively worsening set of health symptoms. While leading multiple expeditions to some of the harshest environments on Earth, Shackleton repeatedly experienced signs of serious physical strain, such as episodes of breathlessness, debilitating fatigue, swelling in the legs and feet, and chest discomfort, though he often downplayed these symptoms in public and continued to press forward in the face of extreme adversity. Accounts from crew members and contemporaries began to suggest that Shackleton's health was faltering well before his final voyage. During the 1907 to 1909 British Antarctic expedition, commonly known as the Nimrod expedition, Shackleton pushed himself to the limits in an attempt to reach the South Pole. In January 1909, he and 3 companions made it to within 97 nautical miles of the pole before turning back to avoid death from exhaustion and starvation. During the return journey, Shackleton became noticeably weaker than the others, needing assistance and frequent rest. Expedition Dr. Eric Marshall later noted Shackleton's severe shortness of breath and difficulty exerting himself, under strained symptoms that seemed disproportionate to the physical exertion involved. Despite this, Shackleton was celebrated as a hero upon his return to Britain and knighted by King Edward. Shackleton's health did not improve during the later Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition, where his ship Endurance was famously crushed in pack ice in the Weddell Sea. During the many months stranded on the ice and subsequent lifeboat journey to Elephant Island, Shackleton once again demonstrated extraordinary leadership and resilience. But behind closed doors, his physical limitations were becoming more visible. Fellow crew member Frank Worsley observed that Shackleton often became breathless during extended activity and struggled with episodes of fatigue that forced him to pause during long marches. Although his ability to motivate and direct his men never wavered, his physical stamina was clearly diminishing. Following the First World War, Shackleton began planning another Antarctic voyage, despite his declining condition. In 1921, he launched the Shackleton-Rowett expedition aboard the ship Quest, aiming to chart parts of the subantarctic and explore Enderby Land. By this time, his health had significantly worsened. Friends and colleagues noted he had gained weight. His complexion had become more pallid, and he showed signs of edema or fluid retention, particularly in the legs and ankles. On board Quest, Shackleton suffered at least one documented episode of chest pain, which he refused to discuss openly, consistent with his tendency to downplay personal weakness. On January 5, 1922, while anchored in King Edward Cove at South Georgia Island, Shackleton died suddenly of a heart attack. He was just 47 years old. The ship's doctor, Alexander Macklin, who had also served on the Endurance, had urged him to rest and abandon the expedition, fearing a major cardiac event. Shackleton ignored the advice. How could a man who had once led grueling sledging expeditions across Antarctica die so young? What led to his physical breakdown? For decades, the mystery surrounding Shackleton's health remained unresolved. Contemporary medical knowledge offered only a few plausible explanations. One theory was scurvy, a common affliction among polar explorers due to vitamin C deficiency. But this was considered unlikely, as Shackleton's symptoms didn't match the classic signs. And he had always been careful to include antiscorbutic foods such as lime juice in his expeditions. Others believed he may have suffered from a congenital heart defect. especially given the early age of his death and recurring episodes of chest pain and fatigue. Still, this did not fully account for his symptoms over such a long duration. However, in May 2021, a breakthrough study published in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine offered a long-awaited answer to one of the most enduring mysteries of polar exploration: the cause of Sir Ernest Shackleton's deteriorating health and premature death at the age of 47, drawing from historical records, eyewitness accounts, and modern medical knowledge. A team of researchers led by Dr. Ian Calder and Dr. Paul Lee concluded that Shackleton had suffered from beriberi-induced cardiomyopathy, a chronic and ultimately fatal condition caused by a prolonged deficiency of thiamine, also known as vitamin B1. For decades, the prevailing theories attributed Shackleton's deteriorating symptoms to a mix of scurvy, congenital heart disease, or damage from overexertion and heavy smoking. However, none of these fully explained the chronic nature of his symptoms, which manifested even during periods of rest and outside the harshest expedition phases. Autopsy results conducted by Dr. Alexander Macklin, one of the physicians on board Quest, had suggested coronary thrombosis but offered limited insight into the underlying causes. Macklin had also observed that Shackleton's arteries showed signs of hardening, though not unusually so for his age. The 2021 study reanalyzed these historical data points through a modern lens, focusing on the nutritional content of the rations consumed during Shackleton's expeditions. The diet of early polar explorers was heavily reliant on preserved foods, such as tinned meats, hardtack biscuits, pemmican, and tea, designed for caloric density and portability, not for micronutrient balance. Fresh fruits and vegetables, the primary sources of many essential vitamins, were absent for months at a time. Most critically, the primary sources of thiamine, such as whole grains, legumes, and certain meats, were either unavailable or destroyed during the cooking and preservation processes used in preparing expedition rations. The researchers highlighted that long-term consumption of such a diet could result in a progressive depletion of thiamine stores, which are essential for converting carbohydrates into energy at the cellular level. Beriberi, the disease caused by thiamine deficiency, presents in two forms: dry beriberi, which affects the nervous system, and wet beriberi, which impacts the cardiovascular system. Shackleton's symptoms aligned closely with the latter. Wet beriberi leads to dilation of the heart chambers, fluid retention, breathlessness, and ultimately congestive heart failure, all symptoms consistently reported by those who observed Shackleton during his expeditions. The researchers emphasized that cold exposure and physical stress could exacerbate the heart's vulnerability under such nutritional deficiencies, creating a deadly combination in the polar environment. One of the most compelling aspects of the study was its rejection of scurvy as a primary cause. While scurvy was indeed rampant in early polar expeditions, most notoriously during Robert Falcon Scott's fatal 1911 to 1912 Terra Nova expedition, Shackleton was aware of its risks and had taken preventive measures, such as issuing lime juice. During the Nimrod expedition, moreover, his symptoms did not include hallmark signs of scurvy, such as bleeding gums, bruising, or impaired wound healing. As for the theory of hereditary heart disease, there is no conclusive evidence from Shackleton's family history to support it, and the pattern of his symptoms was more indicative of a progressive acquired condition. The implications of this diagnosis extend beyond Shackleton's case. It suggests that beriberi may have been a hidden but widespread problem during the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The extreme demands placed on the body in polar conditions, combined with restricted diets, limited medical understanding, and relentless physical activity, created an ideal environment for thiamine deficiency to flourish. It's now believed that other explorers who perished or suffered debilitating conditions during these expeditions may have been affected by similar deficiencies that were misdiagnosed or undocumented at the time. But wait, there's more to unravel. The 21st century has seen a remarkable convergence of technology, science, and historical curiosity in the ongoing effort to uncover the mysteries surrounding Sir Ernest Shackleton and his expeditions. as equipment and methodologies for undersea exploration rapidly advanced. What was once inaccessible beneath Antarctic ice or North Atlantic waters has increasingly come within human reach. From the development of sophisticated icebreaker vessels to remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and side-scan sonar arrays, these breakthroughs have breathed new life into polar archaeology and the forensic investigation of lost expeditions, particularly those associated with Shackleton. Side-scan sonar has proven to be one of the most vital tools in modern marine exploration. By emitting acoustic pulses in a wide fan shape from a towed device, researchers can generate high-resolution images of the seafloor. This technology allows scientists to detect anomalies, such as shipwrecks or geological formations, hidden under meters of sediment or ice. In conjunction with GPS mapping and bathymetric data, side-scan sonar has become instrumental in locating long-lost vessels. Similarly, ROVs, which can reach depths of over 6,000 meters, have revolutionized visual inspection and recovery in environments too extreme or dangerous for human divers. These remotely piloted underwater vehicles are often fitted with high-definition cameras, mechanical arms, and sensor arrays, allowing researchers to explore wreck sites in real time and collect samples without disturbing the surroundings. One of the most high-profile applications of these technologies came in March 2022, when an international team led by the Falklands Maritime Heritage, Trust, and Endurance 22 expedition announced the discovery of Shackleton's lost ship Endurance. The Endurance 22 expedition set sail aboard the SA Agulhas II, a South African polar research and logistics vessel capable of navigating heavy sea ice. Launched from Cape Town in early February 2022. The ship was equipped with state-of-the-art navigation tools, including submersible autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, ultra-high-resolution side-scan sonar, and cameras developed by Saab's Sabertooth ROV system. These Sabertooth hybrids were capable of diving to extreme depths and operating for long durations under thick sea ice. They allowed the team to scan vast areas of the seafloor in detail previously unimaginable. The search area was located within the eastern sector of the Weddell Sea, off the coast of Antarctica. Historical navigation logs by Captain Frank Worsley, who meticulously documented the Endurance's position before it was abandoned, provided a critical reference point. Using his final recorded coordinates as a starting base, the Endurance 22 team identified a target search zone spanning roughly 240 square kilometers. Despite the passage of 107 years, the Endurance was found on March 5, 2022, just 4 nautical miles south of Worsley's last recorded position. At a depth of 3,008 meters, 9,869 feet. The accuracy of Worsley's navigation, made with only a sextant and chronometer, astonished modern explorers and highlighted the extraordinary seamanship of Shackleton's crew. What made the discovery even more remarkable was the condition of the wreck. The Endurance lay upright on the seabed, almost perfectly preserved in the pitch dark, freezing waters of the Weddell Sea, shielded from light, oxygen, and, most significantly, wood-eating organisms such as shipworms, which do not survive in Antarctic conditions. The ship appeared almost frozen in time. The hull was largely intact, with the name Endurance clearly visible across the stern in golden letters. The ship's helm, rudder, railings, and deck structures were still in place, albeit encrusted with marine ice and sediments. The ship's masts had collapsed, likely during the initial sinking or due to shifting ice pressure over the decades. But the overall structural integrity was astonishing given its age and the harsh environment it had endured. Unlike many wrecks that deteriorate rapidly due to environmental and biological activity, the Endurance offered scholars a pristine glimpse into early 20th century shipbuilding and the logistical frameworks of polar expeditions. Constructed in 1912 in Sandefjord, Norway, by the Framnes shipyard, the vessel was specially designed for polar service. Her hull was reinforced with planks up to 30 inches thick and framed with greenheart wood, dense and exceptionally strong. These design elements were still visible and largely intact when the wreck was surveyed. The discovery of the wreck in such an untouched state brought renewed public interest in that story. prompting educational initiatives, museum exhibitions, and documentaries worldwide. Footage from the expedition was used in the National Geographic special The Lost Ship of Shackleton, which detailed the technology and effort behind the search. The Endurance 22 mission was led by Dr. John Shears, a British polar geographer, with marine archaeologist Menzin Bound serving as the expedition's director of exploration. Their team included more than 100 experts from 12 different nations, covering fields such as oceanography, glaciology, marine engineering, history, and underwater robotics. The operation, which was entirely carbon neutral, also served as a platform for climate change research, with scientists on board collecting environmental data about sea ice thickness, ocean temperatures, and biodiversity in the Weddell Sea. Importantly, the Endurance wreck site was designated a protected monument under the Antarctic Treaty System. According to the protocols established by the Antarctic Treaty and the 1991 Environmental Protocol, the site will not be disturbed or salvaged, ensuring that it remains preserved for future generations and research. But wait, we're not done with the Shackleton mystery just yet. Institutions like the Royal Geographical Society, the Scott Polar Research Institute at the University of Cambridge, and the Royal Canadian Geographical Society (RCGs) have played pivotal roles in coordinating research, archiving materials, and launching new expeditions. One such effort was the 2023 Quest Wreck Search, a Canadian-led project that sought to locate the final ship Shackleton sailed aboard, Quest, which sank in 1962 off the coast of Newfoundland. After decades of mystery surrounding the vessel's final resting place, the expedition brought long-awaited closure to a significant chapter in the life of one of history's most iconic explorers. The discovery, announced in June 2024, not only concluded the search for Shackleton's final ship, but also added to the legacy of his enduring presence in the polar narrative, connecting his final voyage a century ago with the technological capabilities of the modern era. Quest, a 125-foot steam-powered sealing vessel originally built in 1917 in Risør, Norway, had a relatively short but eventful life in the service of exploration. She was purchased in 1921 by the Shackleton-Rowett expedition, with financial backing from British philanthropist John Quiller Rowett, and repurposed for Shackleton's final attempt to explore subantarctic and Antarctic regions. Departing from London on September 17, 1921, with a crew of 24 men, Quest aimed to chart new territories and gather scientific data from little-known regions of the Southern Ocean. The ship reached South Georgia in January 1922. However, Shackleton, already suffering from deteriorating health, died of a heart attack aboard Quest on January 5, 1922, in Grytviken Harbor. His death, at the age of 47, brought an abrupt end to the expedition's ambitions and left the vessel historically linked with the closing act of the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. After Shackleton's death, Quest returned to the UK and went on to serve various roles over the following decades. It was used in Arctic surveys, whaling support operations, and even Royal Navy service during the Second World War. However, on May 5, 1962, while engaged in seal hunting activities, Quest struck ice and sank in the Labrador Sea off the coast of Newfoundland. Though her crew survived, the exact coordinates of the wreck were never precisely logged. The ship slowly faded from public memory. Efforts to locate Quest had been underway for years, but intensified significantly in the early 2020s, coinciding with renewed global interest in Shackleton's legacy, especially after the successful discovery of the Endurance in 2022. In 2023, the RCGs announced a mission under its Expedition Quest initiative to locate the sunken vessel, working in collaboration with the Newfoundland and Labrador government, marine archaeologists, the Canadian Hydrographic Service, and researchers from Memorial University. The team deployed the latest deep-sea survey equipment in a focused search zone identified through historical ship logs, eyewitness accounts, and ocean drift modeling. The wreck was located in June 2024 at a depth of approximately 390 meters, 1,280 feet off the coast of Labrador. Aboard the Canadian research vessel Leeway Odyssey, the team used side-scan sonar to detect anomalies on the seabed before confirming the identity of Quest through video footage captured by an ROV. The footage revealed that the wreck was lying upright on the seafloor with a largely intact wooden hull and superstructure. Despite damage to the stern and rigging, likely caused by its final encounter with pack ice, the vessel was remarkably well preserved. The distinct features of Quest, including its rounded bow, reinforced decking, and exposed engine housing, made positive identification possible. Notably, the ship's rudder and screw were still attached, a rare occurrence in long-submerged wooden wrecks. The condition of the wreck owes much to the cold, loxygen environment of the Labrador Sea, which significantly slows the decomposition of organic material. Marine biologists on the expedition noted the presence of deep-sea corals and cold-water anemones colonizing the site, suggesting the area had remained undisturbed for decades. No human remains or personal items were recovered as the ship had been evacuated before sinking. In line with Canadian heritage laws and UNESCO's Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage, the site was documented but left undisturbed, and its location will be protected as a maritime cultural heritage site. The discovery of Quest was met with international acclaim, with historians, maritime archaeologists, and Shackleton scholars recognizing it as a historically significant event. While endurance had symbolized Shackleton's greatest test of leadership, and survival, Quest represented the closing chapter of his life and the end of an era in exploration. John Geiger, CEO of the RCGS, stated that the find was a profoundly meaningful conclusion to the Shackleton story, connecting the past with the present and honoring the legacy of one of history's most resilient explorers. The find also coincided with the centennial of Shackleton's death, further deepening its symbolic weight. Knowing what we know now, one has to ask, why did Ernest Shackleton push himself so hard? One can safely say that he was motivated by a blend of personal ambition, national pride, and a quest for exploration. Educated at Dulwich College and the Merchant Marine, he joined Scott's Discovery Expedition in 1901 and gained first-hand polar experience. After returning to England in 1909, his near miss of the South Pole, reached within 97 nautical miles, earned him a knighthood from King Edward VII and transformed him into a national celebrity. His public appeal was fueled by dramatic dispatches, exclusive newspaper contracts, notably with the Daily Mail, and vivid books like In the Heart of the Antarctic and South, in which he crafted a compelling narrative of struggle, endurance, and leadership. Shackleton was a naturally gifted writer and storyteller. He documented much of his expeditions in journals and authored detailed accounts. For example, his Heart of the Antarctic described blistering blizzards, sledging across treacherous ice, and man-hauling loads in sub-zero temperatures. These personal records, augmented by contributions from expedition photographers and writers, turned his travels into international bestsellers and made his survival story arguably more compelling than scientific success. Upon his return from the Nimrod expedition in 1909, the British public greeted Shackleton with adulation. He received a hero's welcome in New Zealand and England, where he toured lecturing to audiences and dignitaries alike, including royalty. Newspapers such as The Times praised his pluck and determination, and the Royal Geographical Society lauded his leadership qualities even though he had not reached the pole itself. The reaction reflected Victorian-era ideals of honorable failure achieved through bravery and moral integrity. When news of his abrupt death arrived in early 1922, the reaction was immediate and widespread. Telegraph wires carried the announcement of his heart attack aboard Quest, while European newspapers paid tribute to him. They branded him as a gallant explorer and a national loss. The Times editorialized that he had few equals in daring, foresight, and organizational skill, and the King and Queen sent telegrams expressing heartfelt sympathy to Lady Shackleton. Memorial services, first in Montevideo with full military honors, then at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, attended by members of the royal family, should tell you all you need to know about his standing, Commander Frank Wild later described the mood among the crew as stunned. Shackleton's death marked the end of the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. His leadership style validated principles that later became formalized, putting the welfare of men above objectives, maintaining morale through structured routines whether aboard the Discovery or Endurance, and ensuring solid provisioning and management. While the British Royal Navy still favored man-hauling over what modern historians term inefficient practices, Shackleton pioneered innovations like using Siberian ponies, rotating leadership duties, and focusing on humane treatment of crew members to bolster loyalty and resilience. These approaches were very forward-thinking for the era. Shackleton's legacy evolved in the decades after his death, initially overshadowed by Robert Scott, whose scientific accomplishments and tragic demise were memorialized in dozens of monuments. Shackleton was often seen as a charismatic survivor rather than a serious explorer. Over time, particularly after mid-century works like Alfred Lansing's Endurance, and institutional recognition such as the Shackleton Memorial Library at Cambridge's Scott Polar Research Institute and a statue outside the Royal Geographical Society in Kensington, he was rediscovered. And now, with the discoveries and research of the past few years, we possess the most complete picture ever assembled of Sir Ernest Shackleton's extraordinary life, the toll it took on his body, and the fate of the ships that carried him into legend. What was once a story filled with foggy uncertainties has now become a timeline rich in forensic clarity. From the grueling Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition of 1914 to 1917, to his final voyage aboard Quest in 1921. Every step of Shackleton's journey has been revisited with the benefit of 21st century technology and scholarship. The veil of mystery that long surrounded his health, his death, and the wrecks of Endurance and Quest has been finally lifted.